The Celtic Twilight by W.B. Yeats. Drumcliff and Roses. Drumcliff and roses were, are, and ever shall be. Please heaven, places of unearthly resort, I have lived near by them, and in them, time after time, and have gathered thus many a crumb of fairy lore. Drumcliff is a wide green valley, lying at the foot of Ben Bulben, the mountain in whose side the square white door swings open at nightfall to loose the fairy riders on the world. You know, the jinn that come out at night. The great Saint Columba himself, the builder of many of the old ruins in the valley, climbed the mountains on one notable day to get near heaven with his prayers. Drumcliff and Rosses. I probably said roses. Rosses is a little sea diving sandy plain covered with short grass, like a green tablecloth, and lying in the foam midway between the round cairn-headed Knocknarea and Ben Bulben, famous for hawks. But for Ben Bulben and Knocknarea, many a poor sailor be cast away, as the rhyme goes. So is it Knocknarea? Okay. At the northern corner of Rosses is the little promontory of sand and rocks and grass, a mournful, haunted place. No wise peasant would fall asleep under its low cliff, for he who sleeps here may wake silly, the good people having carried off his soul. Well, I feel I'm immune from waking up silly in that sense, but what's wrong with being silly? There is no more ready shortcut to the dim kingdom than this plovery headland. For covered and smothered now from sight by mounds of sand, a long cave goes thither, full of gold and silver, and the most beautiful parlors and drawing rooms. Once before the sand covered it, a dog strayed in, and was heard yelping helplessly deep underground in a fort far inland. These forts are raths made before modern history had begun. Cover all Rosses and all Columkille. The one where the dog yelped. The one where the dog yelped has, like most others, an underground beehive chamber in the midst. Once I was poking about there, an unusually intelligent and reading peasant who had come with me and waited outside, knelt down by the opening and whispered in a timid voice, "Are you all right, sir?" I had been some little while underground, and I feared I had been carried off like the dog. No wonder he was afraid, for the fort has long been circled by ill-boding rumors, and it is on the ridge of a small hill, on whose northern slope lie a few stray cottages. One night a farmer's young son came from one of them, and saw the fort all flaming, and ran towards it. but the glamour fell on him, and he sprang on to a fence, cross-legged, and commenced beating it with a stick. For he imagined the fence was a horse, and that all night long he went on the most wonderful ride through the country. In the morning he was still beating his fence, and they carried him home, where he remained a simpleton for 3 years, before he came to himself again. A little later, a farmer tried to level the fort. His cows and horses died, and all manner of trouble overtook him, and finally he himself was led home and left useless, with his head on his knees by the fire, to the day of his death. A few hundred years southwards of the northern angle of Rosses is another angle having also its cave, although this one is not covered with sand. About 20 years ago, a brig was wrecked nearby, and 3 or 4 fishermen were put to watch the deserted hulk through the darkness. At midnight they saw sitting on a stone at the cave's mouth 2 red-capped fiddlers, fiddling with all their might. The men fled. A great crowd of villagers rushed down to the cave to see the fiddlers, but the creatures had gone. To the wise peasant, the green hills and woods round him are full of never-fading mystery. When the aged countrywoman stands at her door in the evening, and in her own words looks at the mountains and thinks of the goodness of God, God is all the nearer, because the pagan powers are not far. I don't like to, obviously, the powers of the people, of the styles of homes or their things, but, pagan and heathen, I do not like to use such slurs for people just because they're of a different faith. The Romans didn't use such terms like that. The people who dwelled in the pags and the heathens come northward in Ben Bulben. Famous for hawks, the white square door swings open at sundown, and those wild, unchristian riders rush forth upon the fields, while southward the white lady, who is doubtless Maeve herself, wanders under the broad cloud nightcap of Knocknarea. How may she doubt these things, even though the priest shakes his head at her? Did not a herd boy know long while since the white lady? She passed so close that the skirt of her dress touched him. He fell down and was dead 3 days. But this is merely the small gossip of fairdom, the little stitches that join this world and the other. And why, if why should a being that's been around longer than Christianity accept Christianity or any other invented religion by some founder? One night, as I sat eating Miss H's soda bread, her husband told me a longish story, much the best of all I heard in Ross's. Many a poor man from Fin Cool to our own day has had some adventure to tell of. For those creatures, the good people love to repeat themselves. At any rate, the storytellers do. In the times when we used to travel by the canal, he said I was coming down from Dublin, and when we came to Mullingar, the canal ended, and I began to walk, and stiff and fatigued I was after the slowness. I had some friends with me, and now and then we walked, now and then we rode in a cart, so on till we saw some girls milking cows and stopped to joke with them. After a while we asked them for a drink of milk. We have nothing to put it here. Oh, we have nothing to put in here, they said. But come to the house with us. We went home with them, and sat round the fire talking. After a while the others went, and left me loath to stir from the good fire. I asked the girls for something to eat. There was a pot on the fire, and they took the meat out, and put it on a plate. They told me to eat only the meat that came off the head. When I had eaten, the girls went out, and I did not see them again. It grew darker and darker, and there I still sat, loath as ever to leave the good fire. And after a while 2 men came in, carrying between them a corpse. When I saw them coming, I hid behind the door. Says one to the other, putting the corpse on the spit. Who will turn the spit? Says the other. Michael H. came out of that, and turned the meat. I came out, all of a tremble, and began turning the spit. Michael H., says the one who spoke first, if you let it burn, we'll have to put you on the spit instead. And on that they went out. I sat there trembling and turning the corpse, till towards midnight. The men came again, and the one said it was burnt, the other said it was done right. But having fallen out over it, they both said they would do me no harm that time. And sitting by the fire, one of them cried out, Michael H., can you tell me a story? Devil a one, said I. On which he caught me by the shoulder and put me out like a shot. It was a wild, blowing night. Never in all my born days did I see such a night, the darkest night that ever came out of the heavens. I did not know where I was for the life of me. So when one of the men came after me and touched me on the shoulder with a Michael H., can you tell a story now? I can, says I. In he brought me, and putting me by the fire, says, begin. I have no story but the one, says I, that I was sitting here, and you 2 men brought in a corpse, and put it on the spit, and set me turning it. That will do, says he. You may go in there, and lie down on the bed. And I went nothing loath. And in the morning, where I was, I but in the middle of a green field. If they could get other meat, why are they burning bodies? Ew. In pre-modern times, cannibalism is more common than people think. Drumcliff is a great place for omens. Well, I don't believe, you interpret signs however you want. I don't go looking for omens, because most of them aren't really signs of what people think they are. Before a prosperous before a preposterous fishing season, a herring barrel appears in the midst of a storm cloud, and at a place called Glumgil's Strand, a place of marsh and mire, an ancient boat with Saint Columba himself comes floating in from sea on a moonlight night, a portent of a brave harvesting. They have their dread portents too. Some few seasons ago, a fisherman saw far on the horizon renowned high Brazil, where he who touches shall find no more labor or care, no cynic laughter, but shall go walking about under shadiest boscage and enjoy the conversation of Cu Chulainn and his heroes. A vision of high Brazil forebodes national troubles. Drumcliff and Rosses are chokeful of ghost. By bog, road, rath, hillside, sea border, they gather in all shapes, headless women, men in armor, shadow hares, fire-tongued hounds, whistling seals, and so on. A whistling seal sank a ship the other day. At Drumcliff, there's a very ancient graveyard. The Annals of the Four Masters have this verse about a soldier named Denadach, who died 871 of the Common Era. A pious soldier of the race of Conn lives under hazel crosses at Drumcliff. Not very long ago, an old woman, turning to go into the churchyard at night to pray, saw standing before her a man in armor who asked her where she was going. It was the pious soldier of the race of Conn, says local wisdom, still keeping watch with his ancient piety over the graveyard. And people, a graveyard, a cemetery, a memorial park, it's the same thing, people. But I guess some people don't get that. Again, the custom is still common hereabouts of sprinkling the doorstep with the blood of a chicken on the death of a very young child, thus, as belief is, drawing into the blood the evil spirits from the too weak soul. Blood is a great gatherer of evil spirits. To cut your hand on a stone on going into a fort is said to be very dangerous. Now, it depends on your intention. Blood is a gateway, or just as the other fluids are a gateway of a different sort, gateways of different sorts. But it's your intention, the weakness of a soul that is not spiritually strong enough to be in control of itself or upon such a path that the evil spirits don't come in and do their little game. There is no more curious ghost in Drumcliff or Rosses than the snipe ghost. There is a bush behind a house in a village that I know well for excellent reasons. I do not say whether in Drumcliff or Rosses, or on the slope of Ben Bulben, or even on the plain round Knocknarea. There is a history concerning the house and the bush. A man once lived there who found on the quay of Sligo a package containing 300 pounds in notes. It was dropped by a foreign sea captain. This my man knew, but said nothing. It was money for fright, and the sea captain, not daring to face his owners, committed suicide in mid-ocean. Shortly afterwards my man died. His soul could not rest. At any rate, strange sounds were heard round his house. Though that had grown and prospered since the fright money, the wife was often seen by those alive out in the garden, praying at the bush I have spoken of. For the shade of the dead man appeared there at times. The bush remained to this day. Once portion of a hedge, it now stands by itself, for no one dare put spade or pruning knife about it. As to the strange sounds and voices, they did not cease till a few years ago, when during some repairs a snipe flew out of the solid plaster and away. The troubled ghost says the neighbors of the note finder, was at last dislodged. My forebears and relations have lived near Ross's and Drumcliff these many years. A few miles northward, I am wholly a stranger, and can find nothing. When I ask for stories of the fairies, my answer is some such as was given me by a woman who lives near a white stone fort, one of the few stones in Ireland, under the seaward angle of Ben. They always mind their own affairs, and I always mind mine, for it is dangerous to talk of the creatures. Only friendship for yourself or knowledge of your forebears will loosen these cautious tongues. I knew someone who was afraid he'd become haunted, or his home would become haunted, if he even talked about such spiritual, such uncanonized spiritual things. My friend, the sweet harp string, I give no more than his Irish name for fear of gougers, has the science of unpacking the stubbornest heart, but then he supplies the potheen makers with grain, or is it potheen, with grain from his own fields. Besides, he is descended from a noted Gallic magician who raised the dúil in great Eliza's century, and he has a kind of prescriptive right to tell of all kind of otherworld creatures. They are almost relations of his, if all people say concerning the parentage of magicians true. So if that be true, what you could call the evil magician is certainly somebody who has allowed themselves to become a nexion, whether whether they just allow themselves to, or they're making themselves actively, okay, I'm going to be more manifesting this in this way and this and that way. But as far as a god doesn't breed with a human doesn't breed with a jinn in that way. The light being, the unfallen angels, every being remains whatever being they are, and the sort of physical children between them, they don't. But beings of one type can take part in the actions of another being.